Welcome to Roland's Travels, and today you join me in Bradford on Avon, where we're taking a look at the wharf and also Barton Farm and some of the interesting and historic features that you find. We start our journey from the car park, the Bradford on Avon Wharf car park, which you can find by coming off Malton Drive and then down the little road that you've just seen the sign for. It is pay and display, so make sure you are able to fund your parking place. And the first feature we're going to take a look at is just behind this sign where you see the wooden fence. This area here is where they actually quarried out clay for the canal to line it. It does need a good layer of clay, and you can probably see that it still dips, although they have filled in this area. But if you look around, there's still a bank there, what was remaining of the original edge of the land, and all of this was then scooped out. Clay was scooped out and used in the canal building process. It's a great area to come along and have a picnic and overlook the wharf, and you can see the houses there the other side of the canal. And we're going to take a look at this wharf right now. So let's get ourselves down there. So this is the Kennet and Avon Canal. It took 16 years to construct, and it was opened in 1810, and of course it was used to transport many products by barge and narrowboat along its route. The wharf was busiest during the 1850s, but since the canal has been renovated, it's pretty busy today. As the canal's name suggests, it's partially a river navigation, since it uses the River Kennet between Reading and Newbury and the River Avon between Bath and Bristol. The purely canal part of the waterway is 57 miles in length, out of a total distance of just over 100 miles. The River Kennet itself was turned into a river navigation for goods traffic in 1723, creating a route to the River Thames, and had wharves at Newbury, Aldermaston and Reading. So it's a great place to cycle. This is cycle route number 4, so you can cycle many miles right from Wales right across to London using this particular route, much of it along the canal towpath. That's the barge inn. This is a very old inn. It was opened by 1826. And we're going to take a look at some more in a moment. But we have this lock here as well that the boats have to negotiate to move from the wharf down to the next level. It's a very hilly area, so obviously they tried to follow the valley floor, but there are still ups and downs to be negotiated with the canal. So one of the great joys of having a narrowboat is having to open and close the locks. It's a great system. You can move tons and tons of cargo up and down just using water to float the actual narrowboats. Of course today it's primarily tourists, or even many people who actually live now on narrowboats on the canal. Not too far away in the direction that narrowboat is travelling is a marina, just probably about a mile from there, further along in Bradford on Avon. So many marinas have been built along the canal in recent years, and you can hire yourself a narrowboat for your holiday, so that's a nice thing perhaps you might like to do. And there are many facilities here for boaters too. They can dispose of their toilet waste in the facilities here, and obviously fill up with fresh water as well. Now down here on the wharf there is a cafe. You can enjoy a nice drink and a cake. That's just coming up now on our right hand side, and the pub garden is just across the way to the left. But boats can be hired as well. Also the Barton McKellen there is one you can take a day trip on. Here's another narrowboat entering the lock, heading towards Bath direction. The opposite direction is the way towards London, essentially. So Bath, then Bristol, and then the end of the navigation route that direction. There's one huge flight of locks at Devizes that the narrowboats have to negotiate, and I have done a video on that, so I'll pop a link in the description for you if you'd like to take a look at that very long flight of locks. We'll let you enjoy some of the scenes here at the wharf. And that's the cafe. And boat repairs can be carried out here as well. It's quite an industry has grown up around the canal, so some of the narrowboats are businesses that ply up and down, those that sell coal for the fires people need, or logs. There's been a floating hairdresser. I know there's a floating record store that runs up and down the canal as well and stops off at different points. They can be found on Facebook, and you get to know where they're going to be if you like to buy your vinyl records. System of the water being emptied in the lock. So yes, Bradford Wharf, a very interesting place, full of history, and one well worth the visit. But I want to take you in a moment down to Barton Farm and look at something much older than the canal system here in Bradford and Avon. So we'll leave the wharf behind, we'll work our way just over the bridge now. And first of all, just take a look at a couple of the pubs where you can get yourself a bite to eat or a drink. The Lock Inn, that's relatively new. That was 2 cottages that were converted in the 1990s, so that's fairly modern. But the Canal Tavern, that's a much older public house. That one has been going a long time as well. If you've got a canoe or a kayak, well, you can go into the launch area. So walking back towards the canal towpath now, we've got the Lock Inn on our left. Look at the garden behind the Canal Tavern there. And now we're back with the Kennet and Avon Canal. Yes, if you'd like to hire a canoe, you could do that as well. Now it's great to go for a walk along the towpath, so if you do come to Bradford and Avon, or if you go to Bath and want to walk all the way along the towpath to Bradford and Avon, you can certainly do that. And again, I've got a video of other parts of the Kennet and Avon Canal that you can see, and I'll pop links in those in the description box. Plenty of narrowboats, they've got their logs, they've got their wood burning stoves, many of them. Say, a number of people do actually live on narrowboats these days and travel up and down. Bradford and Avon, as you can see, very hilly, but thankfully had the valley running through it where the canal could flow and minimise the number of locks required through this area. These are corridors for wildlife as well, so there's plenty of ducks, but of course with the trees you get the many different species of birds. There's been a pair of kingfishers in Bradford and Avon recently, because you've got the River Avon as well, just running along next to it. So barges get moored up here. They're only allowed to stay for a limited time before they have to move on. If you want more permanent moorings, you can go into Marina and stay there more permanently without having to be moved on. But we're coming now to a very interesting building. This is the Tithe Barn appearing from behind the wall. Now this was 14th century, so a very old Tithe Barn. It's now managed by English Heritage. So let's get ourselves down to the Tithe Barn and take a look at it. And we're going to look around this area, which is known as Barton Farm, which the Tithe Barn was originally part of Barton Grange, which was a very well equipped manor farm, and that would have had many substantial buildings through the 11th, 12th and indeed 13th centuries. And originally on the site of this Tithe Barn we'll be taking a look at would have been an earlier barn, about 140 feet long, probably about 1300, but would have been dwarfed when this particular new Tithe Barn at the time was built upon it. Possibly around 1330, so it's hard to date it exactly. If you want to come down here for a picnic, there's plenty of grassy areas. You can walk along the canal on the towpath, or you can come along and walk alongside the River Avon, which is just behind the row of trees that you can just see ahead of us there. We'll take a look at the River Avon in a little while. Firstly, let's take a further look at a bit more about the Tithe Barn. Really worth investigating this. It's quite magnificent, and you'll see that as we go inside it. After Shaftesbury Abbey, who was the owner of the barn when the abbeys were suppressed in 1539, the barn was passed into private hands, and it was part of a working farm right until 1914, until the outbreak of World War I. Now, these projecting porches are called strays, S-T-R-E-Y-S. Now, as well as being entrances to the barn, they enable that when the wind blows through in the right direction, they channel a draft through the building from one side to the other, which will help the workers to do winnowing corn and separating the grain from the chaff, which is amazing. Do excuse those barking dogs, they're a bit of a menace. And but there you go. Whenever you're filming, you get this kind of stuff going on. We're going to go inside and have a look. There's a very old coffin for you to take a look at as we walk in. Information boards, as you always get in these sort of places as well. It was the Wiltshire Archaeological Society that came to the rescue after 1914 to make sure the barn was saved and wasn't destroyed, along with obviously other properties, other buildings around have been kept nicely, which are used. We'll see some of those used as shops and other things later on. The magnificent roof, and just see how large this really is. Incredible building, isn't it, when you look at it? I just love the timber work in the roof. Where you have the back doors and the front doors opposite, that would generate that wind there that would enable the sorting of the wheat from the chaff. The coffin that we saw as we came in, I didn't mention that, but it's possibly Roman. It has that look about it. It's interesting to see how the roof trusses are held on, the extra block of wood within the stonework, and that seats the roof on top. So that the lateral thrust of the main roof trusses is balanced by buttresses. Although insufficient by the time of the restoration in the 1950s, some of the buttresses have been cut back to allow room for a horse-drawn engine, a mill powered by a horse walking around and turning a central shaft. So you can see the sort of cutouts in the wall that we looked at. Now we're outside again, so let's take a look now at the outside of the building a little bit more. Take a look around this area in more detail. So there's the buttresses on the outside to give that extra support so the building doesn't collapse under the weight of the roof. Imagine the wind blowing through there and those early workers separating the wheat from the chaff using that wind tunnel essentially, and of course there are two of them which would speed up the work. yourself a cold drink or a lolly. There's a little ice cream van there. One of the smallest I've seen. You'll see a bit more of that in a moment. But obviously the area's been a little bit commercialised to some extent in a tasteful way in order to help fund the area. So there's a shop on the top of those steps and underneath, so you can take a look in there. I'll give you a little tour, shall we? You'd like that? Okay. Let's make our way up these steps and have a look inside the granary. So they're going to the upper floor first of all, and then we'll look downstairs in a moment. Let's go up the stairs. In this section of the shop they sell larger things like furniture. But worth having a look back from top of these steps before we go in, isn't it? Let's have a quick look. Just survey the scene. And there's the original farm. We're going to take a look more at that in a moment. So before we do, let's get ourselves in the shop. I do like this sort of country stores. Don't always buy much, to be honest, but I do like having a look round them. And they sell some nice things. And it's worth coming in here just again to look inside the building itself and the age of it. And now we're downstairs. Let's have a look at this one. Again, more of the smaller items, little trinkets, cards and things like that that you can purchase as a souvenir of your trip to Bradford on Avon. Right, we better get ourselves back out. Shall we go for a drink? No, but there it is. Isn't that tiny? Let's take a closer look at the farmhouse now. You notice in the back there are some dovecots. Pigeon was a tasty dish in its day. There are people who still like pigeon now, but it is an acquired taste possibly, I don't know. The farmhouse here may have been originally built to house the Abbess of Shaftesbury's bailiff and his retinue on occasional visits apparently. Now we're going to take a look at the crossing here for the River Avon. There is Barton Bridge, a medieval bridge. It's worth taking a look at. We're going to walk on that in a second. That's 14th century. Not this little thing here, this is more modern. But as we get over the forward part crossing, we're now coming on to the bridge itself. It's got 4 pointed Gothic arches, which we'll take a look at when we get back on the riverbank. It's been built to connect Barton Farm with the property to the north and perhaps with Barton and the manor of Kelston to the west, which was administered by the bailiff of Bradford. It's not a packhorse bridge. Sometimes people have called it a packhorse bridge. There's actually a World War II pillbox here, gun placement. Along the river you'll find many of these in canals in Britain. These were built in case the Germans were going to use the canals or rivers to sail up. So more than likely many of the Home Guard would have been based in these sort of places. And again, from the bridge we can now take a look at the River Avon, which is much used actually, as well as the canal. This is used by rowers. In fact, an Olympic rower has come from Bradford Avon, and there's a plaque to that event. Ed McKeever, gold medal winner. So here's a Bradford on Avon men. We take a look back the other way towards Bradford from the, or Bradford town I should say, the actual town of Bradford on Avon. In that direction, that's the railway crossing. Train that runs from Bristol to London. And now we get a closer look at the bridge from outside of it, as it were, not on it. So you can see the medieval shape of that bridge. So it's lasted a long time. It's a good 600 to 700 years old. Now the original cattle barns, they've turned into little craft shops, so this was pretty derelict when it was taken over back in the 50s, I think that happened, and they were turned into these lovely units. So you can come along here, just have a quick look back at the farmhouse. The bit to the right there sticking out is probably more of the original. It's been added on to in later years on this side, on the left side. And there's a little park as well. If you've got little ones, they can come and enjoy a little ride on the swings and things. So let's just have a quick walk around this L-shaped section of former cow sheds, which are now much more attractive than cow sheds. So plenty of things such as art galleries, there's glassware and all sorts of things along here. So let's take a look for you. And I hope you enjoy this little trip down this area here. It's called the Tithe Barn Workshops. Getting a bit of flicker from the fluorescent lights in there. And you can get yourself a nice cup of tea as well. A fine selection of teapots available in there as well to use. So there's much to see in Bradford on Avon, and I've made several videos and intend to make more because we've barely scratched the surface even with the ones I've made, and there's a lot of interesting history that you can look at and find out about. So Bradford Avon's got a free museum as well if you do come. It's above the library, so come when the library's open, or I think it actually opens as well. It's got a separate entry. It can open if the library's closed, so do come along and check that out. And that's the last of the shops. Yeah, but interesting, nice crafts and things you can buy when you make your visit down to Barton Farm. So Bradford and Avon obviously has much interest in the town centre itself, but just off the town centre, it's not far away. You can come along here and enjoy a few hours. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the video. Please do subscribe to the channel before you go. Got much more to come for you. If you'd like to give the video a thumbs up, it's always appreciated, and even leave a comment. It's always good to hear from viewers and to listen to your thoughts and expressions about the videos. Thanks ever so much for watching, and I hope to see you again in a future video. Take care.